Good morning. Good morning. I just met a girl named Maria. And suddenly I found, it wasn't right. Suddenly I found how wonderful a sound can be. Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? We are raw, we are emotional, we are steadfast. I'm good. I'm not great. Okay, I lied. I'm not good. How are you? Give me coffee. How are you? Give me coffee. Hi, Smiley over on TikTok. I see you. Hi, everybody on TikTok. How are you doing? I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of feelings, obviously. Not good. Yeah. I have a lot of feelings. I think that I don't know. I know it's real hard. Lee, I'm so sorry you have to like be a functioning human when things are so desperately sad. I guess, I mean, I think at the end of the day, not a lot of us expected this to happen. I didn't expect it to happen. And I'm sad for everybody. The problem is the people who are celebrating, and thinking they really own the libs. I don't think they've realized what they've done. And that's fine. I mean, that happens. It's happened in history. It's happened throughout history. France in the 1930s, etc. Your husband had to go work around an entire MAGA crew. It will ruin your professional life more than my personal life. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling their personal exposure too in this, right? A lot of people have personal exposure when it comes to that. Oh, there's Bullets. Hi. Hi, Bullets. How are you? Are you happy? That's good. I'm glad you're happy. I'm glad you're happy. Makes a lot of sense. Makes sense that you'd be happy. That's true. Let me see. Where am I? Where am I? But for people like Bullets, Will, I voted for your rights too. Unbelievably. I know. Shocking. You should think about, I'm going to contact your wife, Bullets. So what's her name? What's her name again? I'm not sure. But I think I recall that you have a wife. So I'm going to reach out to her and find out, what is your problem? Does she need to know that you have a problem with women? Is that true? Do you need to have some remedial activity taken with you? Here we go. Anyway. Let's see, where's that? Bye, bitch. Yeah, I mean, this, you can act like this is a contest, That guy stalks me, by the way. The guy who's on the screen, Bullets and Barbecue. He's a stalker. His name is Timothy. I think he lives in Pennsylvania. And he likes to stalk women. And I don't know him, but for some reason he's chosen me to stalk. So I don't really get it. But I will end it. So there. Anyway, let's see. Let me see. Where's my chat box? But yeah. So I'm thinking about everybody. I'm thinking about everyone. Like I think that people who voted for this guy clearly don't understand who he was. But I also, yeah. Oh, give me coffee. I'm so sorry about your papa. I'm so sorry about your papa. Yeah. Yeah, so so I thought about a few things this morning. I thought about my dad first. That's who I thought about first. I thought about my dad. No problem. Hi, Turtle Sauce. How are ya? We're okay. We're okay. So I thought about my dad, who was, a troubled character, but I loved him dearly nonetheless. And we grew incredibly close for the last, I don't know, 20 years of his life. And and you all, if you know me, my dad was a prisoner of war in World War II Germany, and his brother, my uncle, died, fighting for this country. So, yeah, I think it's just an interesting time. I'll calm myself down. And the sadness that I have is for the rights of people that are really scared right now. There's some people who are really scared right now. Yeah. Battling cancer, no family. Yeah, let me get some tissue. I'm sad for, well, I mean, strap in, kids. Strap in. But I can't find any tissue. Not one tissue. Not a one. Not a one. Anyway, oh, turtle. I'm sorry. I just think about the gains that we made, like pricing on drugs, $35 insulin, the CHIPS Act, infrastructure, things that we created for everyone, Republican, Democrat, whatever. And so I think that my sadness is really just for the country. It's not because, oh, my person lost. For me, this isn't about a person. That's what the chuds don't seem to understand. This isn't about a person. It's about humanity. It's about your rights, Bullets, to be an asshole. Because the minute you're an asshole when someone is in charge that doesn't like you, you're going to feel it. I don't know. This is not this is not good. I don't know how close we are on the house, but I don't know how you I don't know how I am disappointed that he got so many votes, you know, like as more than I thought he would. Um but I also okay, so let me go back to my dad cuz that's probably a nicer memory. But my dad, you know, he wrote a story. Yeah, right, some Valium. My dad wrote a story about his time in the war. Maybe I shouldn't talk about my dad. Um, but this isn't, you know, for me, this isn't a sporting, it never has been a sporting contest. It's never even been about the person, but it's really about, I mean, I'm sorry, women are dying. Like, if we don't think that this is going to end up in more death. Anyway, okay, let's not be too despondent. But through the tears, through the disappointment, they are not prepared, Lee, for what this means in their real life. They are not prepared. And you know what? So be it. So be it. So fucking be it. So fucking be it. But you know what? My daughter went to bed crying because she's of childbearing age and she's a lesbian, and she realizes that even the authoritarianism relative to her situation is not nearly as extreme as the threat to the safety of others in this country who don't have the same skin color that she does or whatever, income level, whatever. So I worry about all of those people. She worries about all of those people because there will be others that we're not expecting that end up as victims of this decision. I mean, I think that the disinformation won this election for him. Disinformation was on the ballot and it won. The insurgency, you know how Gal and Jim always talk about the insurgency, the ongoing insurgency, which I know you do. They won. They did it. They did it. They said they would do it, and they did it. Something is fishy. We had a lot of bomb threats in Democratic polling places, right? The bomb threats were centered on Democratic strongholds. So, and they were documented Russian, whatever, generated. It's definitely fishy, but, here we go again. Hi, Neil. Hi, Neil. Hi, Turtle. Lobby for more planting of grassy knolls. Well, you know, here's the funny part is, the really funny part is I don't think is this any good? I don't think that's any good. I'll do that. Just trying to get all the water off my face. The funny part is that there's a lot of chatter about the fact that, you know, he's not a very popular man among his cohorts. Biden won't do shit about Russia. Yeah, I want to talk about King Biden eventually. I want to dream what that would be like. How much of a king can you be without being a total king? It is good. How many refugees can you sponsor? Oh my God. But in all seriousness, there are people who are very afraid for their freedom and their safety this morning. That's true. In all seriousness, there are many people I know and you know who are personally afraid for their safety this morning. And it's not going to stop anything. We'll continue to be as loud as we need to. But this is by no means, a promising outcome. How much do you need to open a trust? Oh, I don't know. What does that mean? What does that mean? I don't even know what that means. I don't know. Has anyone heard about the House races? Do we have any outcomes on the House? Bigots will feel, well, they do already. Oh, they do feel emboldened. We just had one in the fucking chat this morning. Bullets and Barbecue is a fucking bigot. He's a racist. He drinks vodka from the bottle, which is peak incel. He is in a loveless marriage, so he stalks all these women online so that he can masturbate to them. He clips all my stuff so he can masturbate to it. I don't really get it. So that's not going to change. But you know what? I voted for their rights too. Will Hawaii become the new Taiwan? We lost the House and the Senate. Fantastic. That's great. Fucking great. Way to go, everybody. Way to go. Oh, this is not working. I don't think my little monster joint is going to work, because I think it's not. Anyway. We lost the House and the Senate. Okay. 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 No guardrails. There wasn't any, really, to begin with. Wow, we are really a dumb country. We are really a dumb fucking country. We are such a dumb fucking country. But it worked. All the calling Jim Blueanon, all of the exercising people who were pro-democracy voices, all of you all win. You all shut it down. You boosted the disinformation. You silenced voices that were speaking out against corruption. You did it. Good job. You platformed to the fake ass bitches who don't give a shit about democracy. Hello. So you know what? You get what you deserve. Unfortunately, a lot of people are going to die in the process because you're so goddamn stupid and vapid and starfuckery. A republic, if you can keep it. Well, guess what? We lost it. You stupid asses. You stupid motherfuckers. You did it. You lost it. Good job. Good job, everybody. Way to fucking go. There's nothing. No, there's no obstacles. I mean, I don't think people understand this. I don't think people understand this. Literally, you guys, if you voted for him or if you didn't vote, if you sat this one out, you fucking did this. The blood is on your hands. The blood is on your hands. Not mine. I voted for people to live. And if you think we were just being like Blue Anon and, conspiracy theorists and all this stuff, well, strap in, kids, because you're about to get it right up your fucking ass. Disinformation 1. You were conquered by thoughts. You were conquered by lies. You stupid, stupid motherfuckers. The press let us down. You should have named the 600. You should tell people the information that they're getting is not true. You failed, media. You failed. White women failed us again, but you know what? Less of them failed us because we gained with white women. And we gained with white men. At least in the exit polls. We'll see what happens on the real vote. And I'm going to tell you right now, white women are the problem. White women, we need to vote for each other, for humanity, for everyone, instead of voting however, I don't know what logic a woman uses to vote for this, but whatever. There's clearly a lot of them. But, yeah. Yeah, disinformation won this election for him. That's what happened. And we didn't do anything to stop it. The government didn't. Merrick Garland didn't stop it. Didn't say anything about it other than, we're issuing an alert that there has been Russian disinformation spread about eating dogs in Ohio. Nobody fucking listens to that, you stupid, stupid motherfucker. Yeah, think about the countries that rely on food support from the U.S. I just, what people voted in, they have no clue. They have no clue. They think that this is like a Trump presidency from last time where, just a few people died. Just some women were sterilized against their will. Just some children and mothers were separated by force. I feel like the movie set it off too, Wolf's Den. Good morning, love. That's a fucking excellent movie. I might watch that. I hope we don't achieve the ending of Set It Off, but I get your point. What we need right now is a Queen Latifah. That's what we need right now. We need a Queen Latifah. Where did the 14 million... Biden got 81 million votes in 2020. Harris got 67 million. I mean, I'm going to tell you what it is, folks. Sorry, not sorry. This is racism, okay? Kamala Harris lost because she's a chick and she's mixed race. Period. Full stop. So that's the people that voted against her and for Trump. There was plenty of people who did it out of a sense of racism and misogyny. Period. Wow, people voting against their own interests. It just really drives me insane. And I really hesitate, when when there are pundits on and others that represent other groups, I really try to take a step back, because as a white person, it's really not up to me to speak on or to chastise or to whatever about how groups vote. First of all, because white women vote terribly. So I need to fix my own shit before I worry about anybody else's shit. Number one. Number two, oh, hell yeah. Oh, yes, GP, you nailed it. The election result really points to how many people are actually racist, though only maybe in the voting booth. You know, the quiet, there are quiet racists, obviously. This is crazy, y'all. How the fuck can a black man vote for Trump? Well, here's the thing, though. He did gain 10%. Actually, Wolf's Den, I thought that this was exit polling that I was watching, so I don't know about the vote totals, but I didn't think he had made as much progress with black men as Hispanic men, for example, that there was a strong gain in the support from Hispanic men. But I thought there was only a very modest gain from black men, like a 1% or something very small. But I could be wrong about that. The exit polling that I saw also showed that white women, Trump lost white women by about 3 percentage points or something, very small, but still at least in the right direction. It was also 20%. Oh my God. Ah! And white men, actually, in the exit polling, Trump's share went down very, very, very slightly. Very slightly. Which I take to be as good signs, because you want them to go down, not up, right? I would like them to go down much more, but that's not the way we are as people. No gain. Yeah, there was only like this was like, I was looking at the Reuters exit polls, GP, just in case that's, because I know that different people put out different exit polls. But yeah, I don't think black men let us down. Black women certainly didn't let us down, because they never do. They were like 92% Harris in the exit polls. White women let us down. White men let us down. Hispanic men, I'm sorry, you let us down. You know, like, so I think that a disinformation won this election, y'all. They did. They managed to take a pig, put some lipstick on him, and ship it. And nobody batted an eye. Nobody batted an eye. You know, I hope he doesn't do half the things that I think he's going to do. But, you know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Excuse me. I don't think we're going to have to wait long, though, because I think he's going to hit the ground running. Because remember, in many of Trump's speeches, he has said he's going to end the Israeli conflict and the Ukrainian conflict before he gets into office. Do you remember that? So expect the unexpected when it comes to, what is that, the Logan Act? What is the thing where he is going to do more? Oh no, the people around him, Wolf's Den, it's not just Trump. I mean, that's the thing Trump is really the clown that is out front. But it's the people around him, right? It's J.D. Vance. It's Peter Thiel. It's now Mike Flynn, Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller. All of those people are back. It's not him. He's just a clown. He's the guy they say this, and then he says it. Because he's a fucking idiot. Elmo, thank you. Oh my God. That is the destruction of humanity as we know it. That's it. The Heritage Foundation. The London Center for Policy. I mean, so many bad actors have won today. I know. What was it? Morning Joe, who I hate, was like, well, this is just, this is just a moment in time, and da-da-da-da-da. He's a teleprompter reader. I know. He can't even read a teleprompter. But it's not him I'm worried about. I'm not worried about him. He's not that creative. He He could. He'd drop dead tomorrow. It wouldn't change a thing about how I feel. Because again, I'm voting around administrations, and I know exactly who's in his administration, and it's not good for humanity. Period. Full stop. I'm trying to revive this joint that I had to, like, give a new body to. But it's not working. Okay. I'm not going to struggle. I'm not going to struggle with it. I'm going to get another one. Holy shit. People are so dumb. This country is so fucking stupid. The MAGA party is the Diddy party. I know. And nobody cared about the Epstein tapes, about Epstein saying how close they were. Nobody cares. That's a bonus, Jonas. They love that he's fucking 13-year-olds. They love it. Oh my God, Pepper. Vance and the Broligarchs. Regressive religious extremists and bigots will be in charge. Oh my God. Elon Musk. Oh. And just with what the Supreme Court ruled earlier this year about immunity. Who are we? Who are we? Hi, Jay. Hi, love. Who are we? Couch fucking ass. Couch fucking ass. Fuck this. Don't concede. Recount. Block the transition team. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. No. I'm curious what the impact of the bomb threats had, though, on voting centers last night. Not that it would have made necessarily a difference. Hi, BK. Hi, baby. Hi, baby. We're still here. We're still here. Nobody in MSN covered the Epstein story. Nobody. I mean, not that it didn't make a difference. I mean, they just think that's a flex. They think that's the go-to. That's amazing. But yeah. The worst part? What's the worst part? I smoked up all my weed. No, BK! No! That's not acceptable. Babe, I wish I could send you some. I don't know where you're in the Midwest or something. I don't know where you are, but I don't think you're close to me. Otherwise, I'd try to send you. That is the worst, love. It's time to pull out the vodka. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, Washington, I'll be right there. I'll drive up. My internet connection is awful. Hi, GP and Neil and Gimme Coffee and Pepper and Carla la and everybody else. Were the bomb threats a U.S. citizen colluding with Russia? I read it somewhere. Oh, I don't know. I imagine it was. Yeah, J Rance, can your glue gun fix this? Carla's asking. Is that possible? Is this something a glue gun could fix? No? All right. Wow. I think I'm just going to start reading books to you all online. So I'm just going to read books to you. In the end, something does seem off. It does. It seems off. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense that he got the popular vote. You know what the thing is? It went so fast. It went so quick, which is fine, and things change and people improve their counting processes and all that kind of stuff. But it did seem quick. I don't know if there was any kind of shenanigans, and I'm sure people will check out whether or not there were shenanigans. Have you seen the handmade cake made from the Holly Hobby cake form? That's what I'm ordering for my birthday. I love that, Lee. That's how quick it's supposed to go. COVID was a fluke. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, I get you. That makes sense, BK. Maybe you can super glue Trump's lips shut. Put it in his Diet Coke. 168 million votes can't be counted that fast. I don't know. It feels like they can't. The numbers have something like 21 million fewer voters than 2020. That's so bizarre. Isn't that bizarre? I find that to be almost unbelievable that we had so many less voters this year. Just got a call from the school that the vaccination clinic has been canceled for today, and they'll let us know when or if it will be rescheduled. Oh, give me coffee. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't think they are done counting, which is odd, but I don't know. I'm willing to ride the next few days, but I'm also trying to think about. I really actually woke up thinking about my dad, which I've tried to talk about now like 3 times, and I keep getting teary, but I think I can get through it now. But here's what I thought about this morning. My dad wrote that story about the German commander who led the prisoners of war on their winter march, right? He marched in winter between Germany and Poland as the Russians and the Americans were advancing on the Germans. So they did a march, and people died on that march because it was snowing and cold. And my dad wrote this story about the commandant or whatever in his name. They referred to him as Popeye, and he talked about what that experience of marching in the snow as a prisoner of war, and all of those things. Finding out his brother died when he was in the prison camp. He found out his brother died. And all of that, and his takeaway from all of that experience, as he wrote, which I will get those out and read them again, is that he realized that the Germans were not his enemy, and that war and conflict were so beyond shit and useless that it changed him as a person. And even in that moment, he realized and saw the humanity in his enemy. Because his enemy at that point was also trying to save lives of other prisoners and other things. And what it made my father think is, we are all the same and human, and war is a manufactured concept. And, oh, thanks, Oomph. That's very nice of you. And I think I'm really trying to channel him this morning, just in terms of, you need to look for humanity and push through the humanity. And I mean, he taught me a lot about trying to not forgive, but just, I don't know, not see people as enemies. Uh-oh, you can't hear? You should be able to hear. So I think that it's not that I view people as enemies per se, but I really want to try and just focus on, like, how do we move through this? You know? Now what? Now what do we do? Now what do we do? Ooh. Oh, good. Yay. So that's what I woke up thinking about. And the other thing I woke up thinking about was, not only how did we get here in terms of the disinformation piece, because I really do. I think disinformation won last night. I'm not going to keep saying that, but I really feel like it did. And I don't know if today, if this gives anybody a reckoning, if anybody has a like, oh, I realize what we're doing. Now we get harder drugs. I don't know. I want to find the practicality in this and just like move to that part, right? Where it's like, okay, all right, here we go. All right, here we go. Mm-hmm. But I'm not there yet. Not there yet. Yeah. Yeah, so it's yeah. Oh, 45 minutes, Harris to speak. Let me go back to my YouTubeo over here and see what's up. I haven't checked. I don't think I can watch the news for a long time. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch the regular news for a long time. I can't believe this. I cannot believe this. Oops, that's jazz. That's lovely. Hello? I don't think you're fine. Let's see here. What do we got? Elmo. I just can't believe Elon fucking Musk. Oh my God. That's actually the most depressing. That's the most depressing thing. My God, how did we do this? When did Hal Sparks go to bed? I don't know. I went to bed before he did, though. I went to bed before he did. He was pretty upset. About 2 a.m. Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to see where her thing is. Oh, the Supreme Court's meeting. Did you know that?
Our approach takes account of that context. It does require scrutiny of
this
the
is
statement.
Facebook, the SEC, and Cambridge Analytica.
Approach
what?
Does not. And let me at least describe what I understand the other side's approach to be, and Mr. Russell and Mr. Barber can explain if I'm incorrect.
Oh, this only started 8 minutes ago. Do you want to listen to it?
Position to be.
Where are you? There's Thistle.
An if-then statement of this variety, which is a pretty paradigmatic form of statement in a risk disclosure, that the if carries with it an implied representation that the specified triggering event has not previously occurred, subject only to the caveat that it has to be material. Now, let me explain why I think that can't be right with a tangible example. If you take a look at Meta's 10K and the risk disclosures in that 10K, which are voluminous, on page 441, the risk disclosure states that unfavorable media coverage could negatively affect our business. And that is the equivalent of an if-then statement. If we suffer unfavorable media coverage, that could negatively affect our business. I don't think anyone would infer from that that Meta has never previously suffered unfavorable media coverage. And if you read the entirety of the risk disclosures, it's sort of replete with examples like
that. But Mr. Shanmugam, I guess what concerns me a little bit is I don't know if your position is appreciating the fact that past occurrences, past triggering events can still lead to future harm. And that what is misleading is the suggestion when you make your statement completely futuristic that no such future harm is going to occur. So let me give you an example that I hope will clarify this. So suppose a realtor is speaking to a potential buyer about a house, and I think there were some house examples in your briefing. And he says, if crime goes up in this area, homeowners insurance could become more expensive. The triggering event would be crime, and the harm would be more expensive homeowners insurance. Both of those things in the futuristic statement are happening in the future. Wouldn't it be misleading to make this statement if a string of burglaries had actually happened that month, The homeowner has no way of knowing that. The realtor knows that. And at the time the statement is made, the homeowner's insurance has actually already shot up 2 times higher than before. But what I'm suggesting is it's misleading because the homeowner is making a determination of the risk of buying this property and paying a certain amount of homeowner's insurance. And when you say your statement totally futuristically as though the burglary's never happened, they're miscalculating. They're being misled into making that calculation.
Justice Jackson, I would make 3 points in response to that. The first is that I don't think that that statement would be misleading, because I think you have to parse carefully the language of the statement. And I think if somebody says, if crime goes up, some consequence could occur, I think the natural implication of that is if crime goes up from where it is now.
I know.
But that having been said, I want to acknowledge, I think.
But I mean, isn't the whole point of these risk disclosure statements,
keep on,
as I think you admitted, is that the person who is hearing them is trying to determine whether there's going to be a future harm to their business investment, right? I mean, isn't that what they're doing?
I would slightly disagree with that. I think the point of these risk disclosures, as the SEC itself has made clear, is to warn prospectively about the types of risks that a company would face. And a perverse consequence of the other side's approach here is that a company could effectively
But why? But can I just ask you why? Why are you warning about the types of risks? Isn't it because the investor is trying to determine that if any of those risks happen, it's going to be a problem for the investment?
Yes, but a company is not ordinarily making any warranty about the probability of the risk occurring. And the way in which these statements are framed really bears that out. Now, I do want to acknowledge something that I think is underlying your hypothetical and was also underlying Justice Kagan's hypothetical. In many of these cases, the omitted information is something that an investor might like to know. I think we would acknowledge that in these hypotheticals, the omitted information may be material. But the problem with the other side's approach is that it really conflates materiality with falsity. And while both of those elements start from a reasonable investor, they measure very different things. Materiality focuses on the omitted information, whether it is something that, in this court's words, would be important to an investor's decision about whether or not to invest. I think the falsity or misleadingness inquiry focuses on the statement itself. What does the statement connote?
What other disclosure requirements are out there about past events that are relevant to assessing this?
Well, there are many, many, and I do think that this court can write an opinion that sort of draws a square around item 105 disclosures, because while those are intended to be forward-looking, to warn about types of risks, you have item 101, which requires a description
Make a
of
fire
the
in the
business.
backyard. Just don't burn your
item
backyard
106, which is a very specific and recent item included in Regulation SK to warn about cybersecurity events. And you also have item 303, which this court is well familiar with from the McQuarrie case last spring, which is the management discussion and analysis section, which requires broad disclosures about known trends and uncertainties. And I
you're correct.
So on the 50% hypothetical, if the 50% of the plant capacity has been destroyed in the past, is there a disclosure requirement that could encompass that that's separate from the one before us?
I think it could be relevant to, for instance, the description of the business, if the company talks about its facilities there. And a company also has a requirement to update under Form 8K when there have been material changes to the company's business. There are a panoply of these requirements, but we rely on them really simply to make the point that if the SEC ever judges that there needs to be explicit disclosures about a particular type of past or present events, the SEC has the power to promulgate all necessary and appropriate disclosure requirements.
That's what I'm having a little trouble with the question. I think you're actually addressing in terms of the relationship between 105 and
13,
the rest of it.
Something like 12, 13 or 14 less
your position
than
basically
Biden?
That don't worry about
I don't even understand that.
Under 105, because the basic problem is already going to be disclosed under other provisions?
That isn't our submission, Mr. Chief Justice. We certainly acknowledge that there can be circumstances in which even item 105 disclosures can be misleading. And we agree
Fight.
on
We're
many
gonna
of
fight.
the hypotheticals that respondents and
You're
the
not
government
alone.
set out
You're not
in their
alone.
briefs, primarily because those are
You're not
statements
alone.
that contain implied representations of one sort or another.
I'm going to go to
I
the
simply wanna
box
make the
fighting this
point
bullshit.
that I think the great risk of
I'm gonna go to the
accepting
box
respondents and the
fighting this
government's
bullshit.
approach and upholding the Ninth
For
Circuit's
everybody's
decision, which again
benefit,
is
even
an
the
outlier
assholes.
in that it requires disclosure of previous occurrences of the triggering event without any assessment of how likely the risk is to occur. I think the great danger is that it would really convert these disclosures, which again identify types of risks that companies face, into disclosures of laundry lists of past occurrences, which companies would presumably have to keep updated.
You keep accusing the Ninth Circuit
I
of
love
that
you,
absolute
butterflies,
rule,
so
but I'm
much.
hearing your absolute rule. Your absolute rule is, or categorical rule, you say it in your brief at page 19, risk disclosures under 105 make no implied representation about a company's past experiences.
It's true.
Later
A lot
you
of
say,
people.
quote, forward-looking risk disclosures do not make any implied assertion about previous events
Wasn't that
and the
cute?
present risk of harm they
Really so
create.
cute.
So you want a different categorical rule. You say it's contextual, but the only context you're looking at is whether there's a misrepresentation, not a misleading representation. I think that's the question that Justice Kagan was asking you. If you take it out,
Guys.
you're shaking your head yes. You're saying
Oh, Oren.
it has to be an explicit or implicit misrepresentation, but there's no such thing as having a misleading misrepresentation with risk disclosures. Isn't that what you're arguing?
So, Justice Sotomayor, I think no litigant before this court likes to be accused of having a categorical rule, but let me explain to you.
No, but you're smiling because I think that's what you want.
No, I don't. I think we want a rule that goes like this. I think when you have a bare if-then statement, like the statements at issue here, which essentially boil down to the proposition, if there is an episode of data misuse, Facebook may suffer harm to its business or reputation, then in that circumstance, there is no implied representation without more about whether or not data misuse has occurred in the past. It is no different from the adverse publicity
I hope
example.
King Joe
from
does some
the
things,
10K
within
or
the
any number of
guidelines.
other examples.
Could I stop you there?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to these statements, okay? I'm going to start with the one that says, if third parties or developers fail to adopt adequate data security practices, something could happen in the future. But that misleading statement is omitting the critical information that Meta had failed to implement adequate practices to prevent third parties from misusing its data. It had already happened. The third party had disclosed it, failed to disclose how many millions of user information?
It's alleged to be around 30 million, which was
And
in the Guardian article.
And failed to destroy those records as it represented it had. So why isn't that a misleading statement?
So several points in response to that, Justice Sotomayor. And I think it's telling that when you look at respondents in the government's brief, they don't even really try to identify the statements that are at issue here. They just want to talk about why the omitted information matters. Let's leave that aside. I'm happy to join issue on the statements here. The statement you're referring to, which is at the bottom of page 10 of our opening brief, is identified as statement 24 in the complaint.
I don't want to look at the statements. I've read the statement the way it was stated. Let's go back to my point. Why isn't it misleading that there were no mechanisms by the third party, as you state, if they have inadequate mechanisms, X is going to happen? We know there isn't any, because Facebook didn't put any in.
So I actually don't think that that is the claim that plaintiffs have been pursuing. I think that their claim is that the app developer here did not develop sufficient
Why isn't
safeguards.
that misleading?
I think the reason that that is not misleading is because there is no representation here about what has taken place in the past. That statement, no less than the other statements on which they rely, is forward-looking. Now, it differs in one respect, in that it doesn't identify specifically harm to business or reputation. But the fundamental problem with plaintiff's theory as to this statement is that the episode of data misuse that they're complaining about was in the public domain at the time. So their claim has to be something more than
materiality. That's a different issue. That's not what we granted cert on.
Well, they can't possibly pursue a claim in a case where the alleged omitted information was in the public domain, whether you locate that in the materiality element or somewhere else. And that's precisely why their claim has to be that our statement had to contain something more than simply a disclosure about the data misuse that was already in the public domain. And my question to the other side is, what is the something more that they think this statement should have contained that was not already in the public domain at the time?
Mr. Shammigan, I just want to see if I've got it, okay, where you're coming from at least, okay? Highly reticulated regulatory system. Item 105 is about risk factors, and it's necessarily forward-looking. Companies typically do if-then statements. That's generally okay, you would say, like opinions, got it, Omnicare, unless there's some sort of affirmative representation about a fact in the world that's wrong. Is that the gist of your view?
It is, and to pick up on Justice Sotomayor's...
Let me just continue before you pivot back to Justice Sotomayor, which I want you to do too. But to take Justice Kagan's hypothetical, which we're all concerned about, right, the 50%, would that be, in your view, possibly required by other provisions like Item 101, which requires information material to an understanding of the general development of the business?
Yes, it could be already required, and if it isn't, the SEC could.
And Item 303, which requires a disclosure of known trends or uncertainties that have had or that are reasonably likely to have a material impact?
Yes, it could be required by Item 303 as well.
And 106 as well, which is specific to cybersecurity problems.
Yes, but doesn't, I think by everyone's admission, sweep as broadly as to cover what took
But
place.
we don't have any of those provisions before us. This is a 105.
It is, and I do think that the court could write an opinion that makes clear that the context here is a limiting factor on the rule, which is to say that precisely because Item 105 disclosures are forward-looking, a reasonable investor familiar with that regulatory framework would understand that, as Meta warned here, these statements make no representations about the past. And I do think, and the reason I wanted to pivot
away
was just to add the important caveat that you can change this statement pretty easily to render it misleading. If the statement had said, Meta has never experienced an episode of data misuse involving its users, but if it did, it would do harm to Meta's business or reputation. Of course, in that context, the statement would be false or misleading if there had been an episode in the past.
I doubt it,
say
Turtle.
that the court took this case to resolve a circuit conflict
I
here,
believe he
and
will
there are
definitely
basically
try.
sort of three options. Our view is that
I know.
a statement of this variety,
I
as
was
Justice
looking
Gorsuch
forward
just
to you
set
not
out,
using
is
that anymore
ordinarily
either.
forward-looking. The condition does
Ooh,
not
that's a good
ordinarily
idea,
contain an
butterfly
implied
straw.
representation about what
That's
took
a great
place in the
idea.
past.
Art is important.
The Ninth Circuit went all the way in the other direction.
Yeah,
and the Ninth
but-
Circuit said, if a triggering event has taken place in the past,
I just keep
the statement can be false or misleading regardless of whether or not the risk has materialized.
I
The
just keep
circuits in the
coming back
middle
to the
say
fact that I
if
think
the risk
all the
is
bets are
certain
off
or
now.
virtually certain to occur,
That's what I
a
think.
statement can be
All
false
bets are
or
off.
misleading in that circumstance.
But that's
On these
a little
facts,
bit
we would not be liable even
Debbie
under
Downer,
that
so.
test, which was essentially the pre-existing test in the Ninth Circuit before the court relaxed it.
Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas?
You said that the risk factors are
I think technically, of course, you're right,
forward-looking.
Neil, and butterflies.
Is that
and
a
Oren.
regulatory or statutory
I just don't know
requirement?
where we are right now.
So I
when it
think
comes
that
to
the
rule of law.
regulation makes quite clear that
not
what
quite
you are
sure.
warning about is factors that could render the company's an investment in the company speculative or risky. That is in the language of Item 105 itself. Now, that having been said, there can be circumstances in which a company could include in an Item 105 disclosure something about the past or present state of affairs. And the government points to the fact that there was a time when an earlier version of Item 105 required at least some disclosures of that variety.
I hope
That's all
Merrick
well and
Garland gets
good.
fucking
As I
fired.
indicated in response
I
to
hope to
Justices
God we
Gorsuch
can
and
just
Sotomayor,
dispense with all
a
of this
company could
nonsense
choose to
and
do
fire that
and run
fucking
the risk of
asshole.
being held liable. My point is simply that if a company does not do that in the statement at issue,
There was
it cannot
no
be liable for
investigation of
securities
J6 by
fraud
the DOJ.
based on some
There was
categorical
none.
implied representation
There was
that
none.
the specified event had never occurred in the past.
There was no investigation
Well,
of
isn't it
January
the case that an
6th.
evaluation of risks is always forward-looking? Isn't it inherently forward-looking? When you want to know about what risk you face, you want to know what your risk is in the future.
God, man.
It is, and that is essentially what underlies our argument here. I would submit that where I think the Ninth Circuit sort of went off the rails a little bit is that it seemed to conflate the risk of the ultimate harm with the risk of the conditional triggering event occurring.
Well, I think the intuition is that a statement
Yeah, $2 gas.
that simply blandly
Right now.
says that there's a possibility of a risk can, in context, be extremely misleading if there is a high probability of the risk materializing. I think that is the intuition. The fact that something has happened
I was thinking
in the
secession.
past
And frankly, California, y'all come here. We got this. We're the 7th biggest economy in the fucking world.
Happened in the past, you may realize that this reason persists, and therefore
Fuck
it's
all y'all.
predictable
Come on
that the
down.
same
Come on
thing may
down,
happen
nice
in the
people.
past. But
We'll
the mere
start our
fact
own
that
country.
something happened in the past doesn't necessarily tell you what the risk is.
You think I'm
going
kidding?
forward. Do you disagree with any of
Well,
that?
Justice Alito, I think that that is the intuition that supports the circuits that have adopted the so-called virtual certainty rule. The notion that if you warn that a risk is possible, but in fact the harm is certain or almost certain to materialize, that there comes
Fire
a point
Merrick
in
Garland,
which it feels
make
as if the
Kamala
statement is misleading.
the Attorney
Now, here,
General.
precisely because we know that no harm occurred from the initial misuse of the data by Cambridge Analytica, this is an easy case even under that standard.
Well, what if, all right, let's take the hypothetical about the risk of a fire. And let's say that there was a fire, it was a damaging fire, and an analysis of the reason why the fire started was that all the wiring in the plant
They didn't do
is
jack
obsolete
shit
and
about
eventually
that,
has to
Jimmy
be
Coffey.
replaced, but
The
it can't
only
be
bitch
replaced for
sitting
the
in a
next
prison cell right
6
now,
months.
and not
So
for
it shows
long,
there that
is Tina
there's
Peters.
a substantial risk of the recurrence of a fire. On the other hand, if there was a fire and it was caused by the fact that the factory was hit by a piece of space junk that fell out of the sky, the fact that that
My dog
happened
is
doesn't
barking.
really tell you much more about the probability that
I'm gonna
you're
go check
have
on him.
another fire
I'll
based
BRB.
on objects falling out of space. So what do we do with that situation?
So I would say two things about that situation. The first is that if you have a statement that simply says, you know, there may be a risk of a fire occurring at our facility, I don't think that that statement would be misleading simply because there's a modest difference in a modest increase in the probability of that happening because of some factor or another. I think the circuits that have adopted the certainty or virtual certainty standard have done so precisely because all you're saying is there's a possibility of this happening. If there is a certainty of it happening, then the statement starts to feel misleading. But the other thing I would say, and again, I think this is very
Again, I
important,
don't think the rules
is that
matter
here we're
anymore,
talking about
folks.
these sorts
I don't
of
know what you
if-then
didn't get
statements.
about the
If
last
something
24 hours,
occurs,
but I
then
don't
there
think it
may
matters
be
what the
harm
fucking laws
to
say.
the company's business or reputation.
You have a
what you're really
goddamn
warning about in that
fucking
circumstance, I would submit,
king
is
now.
the ultimate harm to business or reputation. So if you're applying a standard like the virtual certainty standard, you know, I think the argument that the other side is making is, well, if you had an episode of data misuse and you were aware of it at the time, that, you know, if it is highly likely that there is going to be harm to your business, then that statement is misleading.
Thank you.
And the problem is that that doesn't work out on these facts.
Justice Sotomayor? Justice Kagan?
So this is very much meant to follow up on Justice Alito's questions. My first note is that in this statement, Facebook actually does have various kinds of statements about what has happened in the past. It doesn't talk about Cambridge Analytica, but it does talk about other things. It says there have been hacking incidents in the past, hacking is a real problem, and we've experienced it. And, you know, if you had left that out, I think that you would have every right to stand up there and say, like, who could really think that our statement says that there aren't hacking incidents in the past, all right? So you put in a bunch of stuff that nobody could accuse you of just omitting, because who could think that? But now say that there's an extraordinary release of confidential data. And let's make it even more extraordinary in this case, because if we make it this case, you'll tell me this was known already and it really wasn't so bad. But, just imagine that, that every user of Facebook had all their confidential data released in some way to a third party who then put it on the open market. So really quite an extraordinary mishap. And just as Justice Alito says, the reason why people want to know about that in assessing risks going forward is because it says something about the company's vulnerabilities. It might say something about operational problems at the company. It might say something about management issues at the company. Like, how does a company allow that to happen? I better go find out. So why wouldn't that be required here? Whatever anything else requires, whatever other requirements there are, this requirement, which is supposed to give people an understanding of future risks, an investor needs to know that, doesn't she?
Yeah, so I would say two things in response to that, Justice Kagan. The first is that, again, with regard to the examples that were given, I think we would acknowledge that there could be a case in which you might draw a negative inference from something that a company said about what took place in the past. Again, it's a contextual analysis that depends on the nature of the statements. But here, I think it's quite clear that the examples that were being given were precisely that. They were examples of the types of efforts improperly to obtain Facebook user data that had occurred in the past, and a reasonable investor, I would submit, would not have been misled by that to believe that no third party had ever gained access to user data or misused that data through other means. But second, to respond to the second half of your question, of course there could be situations in which omitted information would really be of interest to a reasonable investor. That goes to materiality. And yet it is a fundamental principle that this court has articulated in cases like Matrix and McQuarrie, that is not enough, at least for 10B liability, where there cannot be pure omissions liability. There is pure omissions liability under other provisions of the securities laws, but not 10B, which is, of course, enforceable by private investors. And what is the problem that this court would be creating if it went as far as the Ninth Circuit? It would be the problem of creating a regime where a company would be penalized for disclosing about the very risk that eventually materializes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Shammigan, so you would agree, though, an if-then statement can be misleading, and materially possibly so, if it understates the risk going forward, the probability of it?
I think only under the virtual certainty standard.
Yeah.
But not under the standard we are advancing.
I got that.
I think under that
do we
standard,
need to decide the difference between what you're advocating and the virtual certainty, what you're calling the virtual certainty standard? Is that necessary to decision here?
I think that this court could write an opinion that says simply that the Ninth Circuit's rule, as we understand it, and as the Ninth Circuit set out at pages 24A and 25A of the petition appendix, cannot be correct, that it cannot be sufficient to render a statement misleading simply that the specified triggering event has previously occurred in the past without an assessment of the risk of harm. The other side comes back and says, well, it's implicit that if it's immaterial that it would fall outside that rule. But our submission is that's not what the Ninth Circuit was really doing here. The Ninth Circuit was just saying if you have a previous occurrence, the falsity requirement is satisfied. The court could leave for another day the delta between our proposed test and the virtual certainty test, because I think the virtual certainty test creates an exception in circumstances where, again, the risk of harm is certain or virtually certain to materialize. Defendants often prevail under that standard. We certainly think this court should ideally provide guidance and resolve the circuit conflict here definitively, but if the court wanted to say we're not going to decide between those two standards, it just doesn't matter on these facts.
Thank you.
Justice Kavanaugh?
A couple questions on the risk factors. As I understand it, you don't have to identify the probability.
Butterflies, he better pardon Hunter. Let's be gone with that nonsense.
And companies typically don't. If a company said it is highly unlikely that an episode of data misuse is going to materialize, then all of these things would be put into play. Perhaps not surprisingly, companies don't make warranties of that.
Because if they did that, and as Justice Gorsuch said, they understated the risks, then they would be.
Correct. In Justice Alito's hypothetical, if you included language that goes to how probable it is, then you're going to have a problem if you have information that goes to that probability.
Right. And second, the SEC, I think you're acknowledging, could adopt a regulation that says what it currently says about risk factors and added, and by the way, if you're identifying possible future events that could create harm, you also need to identify if those events have occurred in the past.
And what's funny about this
is that a yes?
Yes, and the SEC did not do that when it promulgated Item 106 just last year. It did not include episodes of data misuse in what had to be disclosed, and indeed the SEC shied away from requiring elaborate disclosures about previous occurrences precisely because companies complained about the burden that that would impose.
Thank you.
Mrs. Barrett?
So, Mr. Sandringham, you said that this is about context and about the regulatory context, but it seems to me, based on a lot of the hypotheticals that you've gotten and the ones written in the briefs, is that it's about more than just the regulatory context, but also about the context of the business, the nature of the risk, et cetera, which makes it not easily susceptible to a categorical rule. Let's just say, Justice Gorsuch was asking you to kind of articulate where the line might be. It's hard for me to see why we would adopt the virtual certainty test when it's nobody's first choice. And it seems like the kind of bright line rule that maybe the SEC might want to adopt, that sort of thing, but it's hard for me to see why we would do that. Assume that I think the Ninth Circuit's rule goes too far, and I think your rule goes too far. It seems to me very hard to articulate what the line is, and maybe I can put it this way. It seems like the hardest hypotheticals are the ones where the risks are either unusual or devastating, like a 50%
I'm watching
loss
for
of a factory
Kamala's,
because of a fire, or getting hit by space junk.
Time.
Those are things that are unusual and hard, but nobody would think that a social media company wouldn't be at risk of data breaches, or that data breaches hadn't happened in the past. Or if you're a food supply chain,
Tom.
E. coli outbreaks.
I believe we lost the house.
That sort of thing. If things are going to recur and they're things you associate with the business and they're described at a relatively high level of generality, it seems to me that those kinds of statements. Well, maybe those do seem like they're general statements just about the category of risk that a particular kind of business faces. But if they are more unusual, kind of either or binary choices, make or break the business, well, then those really seem like they're misleading. So if I see it that way, how do I articulate a rule that handles anything more than the case in front of us? Maybe I shouldn't.
Well, Justice Barrett, I think what I would say is that I would grant that I think there are circumstances in which a reasonable investor may have an intuition that something has taken place in the past. The example that I gave earlier, I think, falls into that category. Nobody would think that a company as big as Meta had never suffered unfavorable publicity. And I would submit that if we're talking about data misuse and the like, I think most people would assume that there have been episodes of that variety in the past. I think what you may be reacting to here is the sense that sometimes there are events that seem so significant that it feels as if there ought to be an obligation to disclose them. And maybe the unusual events fall into that category because those are perhaps likely to be events that are really, really significant. Our point is simply that that goes to materiality first and foremost. And again, I think part of the problem with the other side's approach is that it really conflates these elements that are meant to be different. The language of Rule 10b-5 itself makes clear that an omission has to be both material on its own terms and necessary in order to avoid rendering the statement
I mean, I
not
think some
misleading.
of the hypotheticals that you're getting show that not everybody shares that intuition, that materiality is the only thing at stake, that it can also be misleading. Depending on how specific the risk is, people probably have different intuitions that fall along a spectrum. So what, if I'm resisting, I feel like you're still advocating for your categorical.
Well, but all right, so let me offer the important caveat, which is where I started the argument, which is the caveat that we really drew from this court's opinion in Omnicare, which is that implied representations, I think, can take care of many of these circumstances. And we acknowledge in our reply brief that, for instance, a statement can have an implied representation about the current state of affairs.
It
Take
looks
the
like there
final
are quite a
exam
few House
example.
races, according to the New York Times, that aren't
one of
officially
my finals
called,
this
so
semester,
I don't know.
I may have to retake a class. I think there's an implied representation. You're talking about your finals this semester, and if you failed one of them, that statement is then false or misleading. It is because there is an implied representation that we think is absent from a statement of this variety. And I think the court can write an opinion that is mindful of the language of this statement, but recognizing that the reason that there's a circuit conflict is that companies use this form of formulation quite frequently. And so in some sense, the court is deciding it for a category of types of statements, but if the wording changes, the analysis is going to be different.
Justice Jackson?
So I have two questions that are kind of similar. I think that what is bugging me about your view is that you seem to suggest that the only implied misrepresentation or implied representation that matters is a statement that falsely suggests that something didn't happen in the past when it actually did. You've said that many times. But I'm wondering whether there isn't also a statement about what needs to happen in the future from the investor's perspective. So that when you say, if this kind of data breach happens, it could damage Facebook's business. The investor thinks, okay, so if I invest in this business now, I'm going to have to start looking out for signs of this kind of data breach happening in the future.
I'm telling you, come to California, we'll see. It'll be fine. We got plenty of land, really. We can build houses. Come on now.
You're sort of throwing him off the scent.
Who has 2 channels
of the fact
on YouTube?
That what he really needs to do is figure out what harms are going to arise from the data breach that has already occurred. This is similar to Justice Kagan's point about how an investor uses the information. They're looking for vulnerabilities in the company, et cetera. And so I'm just nervous about the suggestion that the only representation that's being made in a futuristic statement is one that relates to the past as opposed to a possible statement about the future in the way that I've described.
So I'd make 2 points about that, Justice Jackson. The first is that I think it's important to look at item 105. And one of the things that item 105 requires is that the risk that you're disclosing be a material risk. In other words, it's got to be something that is reasonably likely
Hi,
to
Terry.
arise.
How are
and
you?
so I actually think if you had, for instance, the example
Gotta
of
go to
our
work.
factory
Buy
being
Carl
hit
at
by a
46%
meteor,
today.
that's
There you
something that
go.
would
For Joe
probably
Biden.
not
No,
have
but
to
it's already
disclose.
There you go.
occurred in all the
Really?
hypotheticals that I'm
Right.
talking about.
Oh.
It's 100%,
okay.
let's say, that there's going to be harm from this because it's happened.
And in some sense, my point is that precisely because it has to be material, I think a reasonable investor would think this is something that is a very real risk. It may have happened in the past. It could happen in the future. And I think that is
No, I guess my question is, why aren't you making a statement with your purely futuristic
I remember
formulation that leads the reasonable investor to believe that no harm of this nature is going to happen right now. Right now. I have to wait. So in my real estate example, the person is, when the real estate agent says, if crime goes up, home insurance rates might go up. The investor says, okay, I'm going to start looking at crime reports because, if this were to happen in the future, then fine, this risk will materialize. What he doesn't know is that crime has already gone up. Crime has already gone up, and that really tomorrow the insurance rates are going to go up. And what I'm suggesting is that you've misled him into thinking that he has to wait for a future triggering event, as opposed to he has to do what he needs to mitigate the harm that will already happen as a result of the past triggering event.
Yes, and I think we would draw a line between a circumstance in which the harm has currently materialized.
Bye, baby.
In other words,
Carla,
the harm
be good
is
today.
ongoing
Be safe,
and therefore
okay?
will exist.
Be gentle
in
with
the
yourself.
future,
Remember
and
that?
A
I love that
circumstance
saying.
in which there is simply a present risk of harm whether from a past event or a
See,
future
even
event.
GP
I think if
loves
there is
you.
merely
He
a
wants you to
risk,
have a good day
there would be
too.
no liability
Even though you
because
guys
that
fight in the
risk
back
is
of the car.
precisely what you're warning of, and you're not making any warranty about whether the triggering event has occurred in the past. And the last
I'll
thing
go
I would
live
say
for her
is that I really do think it's a
speech
question
too.
for my
So if
friends
that's
on the
later
other
in the day, I'll
side,
go live again.
what they think the statements here should have said, because
I
it
think we need a
seems
lot of
clear
community.
that they think it
Okay,
should
wait.
have said
Let me
something
reverse
more
that.
than that
I
there
know
was the
I need a lot
initial
of
episode
community.
of misuse, which was already
Right
in
now.
the public domain.
So,
and I think that the answer to
I
that
think
question
that's why
will point up just
I'm
how
gonna go live
expansive and broad
as
the
much as
implied
I
representation,
can,
really the
just to
warranty is
be in
that they think every
community with
statement
other
includes.
people.
Thank you,
So,
counsel. Mr. Russell?
That's what I'm going to do.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, I'd like to start by making clear our position. First, as to the actual question presented, we agree that a risk disclosure is not misleading because it omits disclosure of an event that is immaterial because it risks no business harm. The Ninth Circuit did not hold otherwise. Second, we agree that in addition to proving materiality, plaintiffs must also show that the risk statement implies that the omitted event did not occur. We don't claim that every risk statement includes that
I mean, you
implication.
can, Tom, if you're
Our position
comfortable,
is
but
simply that
you
they
don't
can
need
and
to.
frequently do,
But you
and
can.
it ultimately depends on the facts and context of each case.
I want people to
Third,
be
for
safe
that
all the
reason,
time, but
the
I
court
don't.
should reject
I am
Facebook's
very
categorical
cautious
rule
with
that item
personal
105
information.
statements are always agnostic.
Despite the
about whether
accusations of
risk
being
has
Lolo
transpired in the
Analytica.
past. Facebook admits that if a student
hold
tells
back
his
a lot of
parents that
information.
there's a risk he may fail an exam when he's already done so, that is misleading because it implies it's possible that he won't, when that isn't
I want to
true.
find out why
The
people
same
are
is
being
true
blocked
of
from
many risk
chatting.
factor
Oh
statements,
yeah, I'm
including the ones
comfortable.
at
I have
issue in
other
this
people's
case.
phone numbers, but
Stating that they were
no problem.
describing an improper disclosure of user data as a hypothetical risk implied that it was possible it wouldn't occur, and that wasn't possible because it already had. This does not mean that issuers must disclose every material occurrence of a risk. They simply must say enough to remove the false impression that the omitted event has not yet materialized, something they generally can do, as Facebook did here with respect to hacking, by simply acknowledging that the risk has materialized in the past. Finally, the Ninth Circuit did not adopt any contrary categorical rule. The court did not discuss whether these particular statements were agnostic about the past because Facebook never argued that they were. It elected instead to argue only that the warrant of risks had not transpired because it viewed the warrant of risks as speaking only to hacking events and business harm. Because Facebook does not challenge the Ninth Circuit's
I
fact-bound
thought
rejection
you
of
thought people
those
were
claims in this
stupider
court,
than they were too,
this court should
Thistledew,
provide
but it
any
turns out that
necessary
you have been
guidance for
right
future
all
cases
along.
in the course of affirming the judgment. I welcome the court's questions.
Mr. Russell, what else should Facebook have provided in the 105 statement to comply with 10B?
So I think they could have said what they said and then said something like, such improper disclosure or misuse of user data has occurred in the past, including recently on a substantial scale. I think that would have removed any misimpression that an event like what happened in Cambridge Analytica hadn't occurred. And the reason that it is reasonable for somebody to think that this statement implies that it hadn't occurred is because an investor, a reasonable investor, hearing a company describe factors that are relevant, factors that make the investment risky, would expect that if something like this had happened, 30 million users' private data released, eventually causing a $100 billion reduction in the market capitalization of the company. The company who is intent on telling the whole truth about the factors that make the investment risky would not speak about such things in hypothetical terms.
I'm sorry, Chief.
Oh, yeah. Your basic submission is that a probabilistic statement
Is
about
it
something
adding magic to a public
carries the
space near
inference
you?
that-
Is that what it
that
is?
something has not occurred.
No, our position is that it can. It
Okay,
doesn't
well,
always.
it can.
Yes.
But I mean, with respect to certainly some, but maybe most,
Oh, GP, you're so great.
probabilistic statement will do the exact opposite. For example, if
There you
you're
go.
leaving my house and I say you might slip on the steps, you wouldn't say, well, that's never happened before.
That's right.
Your inference would be that has happened, and that's why I'm giving you the warning. And it seems to me if you're saying it can go one way in some cases, it can go another way in the other cases, it's a real expansion of the disclosure obligation. In other words, it's not something that is narrow because whether it's happened or not, you have to disclose it.
No.
Well,
That's not-
exactly. Well, how are we supposed to parse whether it's slipping on my steps, or what you say is the actionable in this case?
I think you simply have to do what the court says you have to do in omission cases in Omnicare, which is you always have to ask, how would a reasonable person understand the implications of this sentence? And if it is a case where somebody would understand that the warrant of risk is something that happens all the time,
We're going to listen to that
talking
after,
about it if it
we
happened
can.
in the past. If it's an event like adverse publicity that everybody knows has happened in the past, nobody's going to understand the statement to be implying that it hadn't happened.
So, Mr. Russell, I'm sorry, Chief.
I was just going to follow up. So basically, if you have this and it's the suit is brought, you say, well, the inference either has happened in the past or it hasn't happened in the past, and we're going to go to trial to decide that. It seems to me that's kind of a blank check.
No, you treat it the way you do every omissions case. You can enter summary judgment or enter a motion to dismiss if no reasonable juror could find that this statement implied that the event hadn't happened in the past. In this case, there are at least 4 reasons why it would be reasonable for a jury to decide that this particular set of statements did. The first is the structure, which it is the received wisdom of many courts in many contexts over many years, can and often does imply that speaking of something in a hypothetical term implies that it hasn't happened. But the context of this case reinforces that here, because here we are not talking about something like adverse publicity.
Thanks, Lee. I'm just glad everyone was able to
Mr. Russell, on that, so I just want to make sure there seems to be a point of agreement, not only on the question actually presented.
It's going to be a long road,
but
so.
that
here we are.
Forward-looking risk factor statements don't generally imply anything. There has to be some implied representation about a past.
We knew it was possible.
To get in the door.
We didn't think it was
right?
probable.
Is that common ground?
But it turns out
agree on the generally. I think we
people
do agree
are poopy.
that it's context and dependent, and sometimes
that's my
it does,
official assessment of this
upon an
election
implied representation
season.
that there was no problem in the past.
Yes.
Okay, we agree on that. Everybody seems to, you guys agree on that at least. What about the statement we have here? I want some help with that, because I wonder whether we're in the world of a meteorite or Justice Alito's falling debris, or whether we're in the Chief Justice's world of slip and fall on my front porch. The defendant represented that our industry is prone to cyber attacks. It says that the hacking has become more prevalent in our industry. And it says we cannot assure you that the measures we have will provide absolute security. Why isn't this, given those kinds of warnings, where's the implied representation that Meta has never had a significant data breach?
Because Meta itself insisted vehemently below and in public when this was finally disclosed in 2018 that this was not a hacking event. This was not a cybersecurity event. And the risk disclosures discuss separately the risk of misappropriation of user data by developers. And in that context, it doesn't say any of the things that you just read.
Yeah, well, that's the next paragraph, and it does say that we provide limited information. However, if they fail to adopt or adhere to adequate data security practices, or in the event of a breach of their networks, you're going to have a problem. So again, where's the implied representation that that this hasn't happened in the past? And isn't this exactly the sort of thing that a reasonable investor does know
yes,
can happen?
We are going to need to
large
play some games.
companies
I
with-
agree.
I
Well,
respectfully
Stan, you're right.
federal
Fuck all the
government. I mean,
maggots.
I think China probably has all of our
I'm going to
FBI
keep.
files. You know,
We have to keep going for
data
everybody
breaches are
else
part
who
of
doesn't
our
have any
lives
more
these
energy
days.
to
This
go.
wasn't a data breach, and this is really
Everyone
important.
whose
That
tank
was
is
the
empty, we
principal
need to
argument
fill
that
up our
Facebook made
tanks
below,
again
that these
and just
statements
get in
only
there.
warned about data breaches,
And that means get in the
the
street.
Ninth Circuit rejected
Get in
that
the street
reading.
about SCOTUS.
And the reason for that
Get in the
is
street about the
because,
DOJ.
unlike hacking event, unlike what
I have
China
plenty of
does,
things. I got my
here,
signs
Facebook
ready.
allowed a third-party developer, it just gave them the data. And that doesn't happen, Justice Barrett, all the time. It actually,
Women?
before the disclosures in this case, reasonable investors would have thought that
We
got
gotta
to
get in the street. White women, we're the ones who have to do this. We have to
faced
step up.
allegations of this in December of 2015, and it didn't respond by saying,
This is on
yeah,
us.
that happened and we took
Again.
care of it. It said, we have to conduct an investigation, and if we do, we will take swift
Get
action.
it together,
And by the
you
time they
stupid
issued this
cunts.
report in 2016, they hadn't said boo about this. And so in that context, I think it is very reasonable for investors to understand that by treating
Stop
it as
fucking voting for the
something that may
patriarchy.
happen in the future, they are
How
confirming
stupid are you?
that what their silence had already conveyed, which is that that we didn't substantiate the allegations in the 2015 article.
Whoop. I love
So you're
that.
saying that it is unusual, that because it
Oh,
wasn't, you're
Carrie,
saying it
that's
wasn't a data breach.
fantastic. I love
was
it. Let's
Facebook,
celebrate
Meta,
that.
just
I think that's
handing over
great.
the data. You're saying it falls more in the category of a factory half burning to the ground, something that we
I think the
wouldn't
saddest
necessarily
part is
expect
the
because
dumb
you would have
people
trusted Meta
celebrating today
not
who
to
don't
hand it over.
realize
Is that
that
what
they're
you're
That's
the
right,
mark.
and that's why users were so angry when
It's
they found
handing
out
over
about
the data
this.
without any real controls.
They
Isn't
just
that
don't
right? Isn't
understand
that the
that
allegation?
when the
Right,
hammer
this
comes down, it
evidence-
comes
this
down on everyone.
Episode showed not only
They
that
did what
they had
Madeleine Albright
given this away in this
said
one
we
instance,
would
but that
do.
didn't
They
have
voted
the
in the
capability to keep
fascists.
their promises to users, that users can control who has access to their private data.
Mr. Russell, can I just ask you one other question? You know, Justice Gorsuch and the Chief, too, are kind of trying to pin you down on exactly what you think about these if-then statements or these statements of risk. And you agreed that sometimes they might be purely forward-looking, right?
Yes.
And you said, but they can contain implied representations. And I think Mr. Shanmugam's position is that ordinarily they don't, and is yours that they ordinarily do?
I think that may be a fair representation. That is the received wisdom from all these courts and all these cases and all these contexts.
That's right.
But at
We
the end
take
of the day,
every win
I'm not sure
now.
that it's helpful or necessary to say whether they ordinarily
Hello,
do or they ordinarily don't.
my friends.
At the end of the day, each case has to be
My
considered on
online
its facts.
fam.
Doesn't that
We take
raise
every win.
what for me is a separation of powers or
And
due
we fight
process
for other
concern?
people,
The SEC knows
period.
how to write regulations that require disclosure of past events. As we've discussed, they have those kinds of regulations. And what happens here is this regulation does not explicitly
gotta do
require
it.
that. And then the question is, okay, why not let the SEC do
rugged
that if they want
individualism
to?
is so
And then we
overrated.
have this regulation, and you say, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, in response to Justice Barrett and the Chief. And you said it can sometimes.
And Rugged
contain
is
an
doing
implied
some heavy
representation.
lifting there,
If you're the
Carla.
regulated party, you don't have fair
It's
notice,
really-
one could say.
It's a little Teddy
of
Roosevelt
what
when in
you're
fact it's,
required
you know,
to do.
Woody,
It's guesswork
the
about when you're required to disclose.
Toy Story guy.
And you're going to, therefore, another problem that they raise, and I just want you to respond to all this, that you're going to just over-disclose that, and that's going to defeat the whole purpose of it. So I guess the starting point is, why not let the SEC do this if they want to? Isn't there a notice problem when you do it this way? And doesn't that, in turn, lead to over-disclosures, which undermines the whole kind of theory here?
So I think
The
the
old
premise of the
ragged
question, the
cross.
major
Is
premise
that what
of the
that
other
is?
side's
Is that
argument
hymn?
is that item 105 is
I don't know the
directed at
tune.
disclosing only things that might happen in the future, and that's just wrong.
Or, and this
Right?
is it,
The
right
text
here.
of the
Right here.
regulation says,
But you,
Right
I'm sorry
here.
to interrupt, I just want to
Wait.
get this one point out. And you
Wait, I'm going to read this without background sound. Somewhere there's a trans kid in the deep red South or someone who is pregnant, and we're going to have a lot of work to do. There already was death, destruction, and the fear of oppression and oppression. Now it's got free reign. And I don't think that that's an overstatement. I really don't. Only because of how he has described, or they have described, what they intend to do. I don't know if you've seen the Flynn Flam chatter this morning. There's a lot of celebration going on in that family. There's a lot of communication with Ivan Raiklin, who's also been sending his little demonic messages. And yeah, their delusions came to life. The insurgency worked. And that's really what it comes down to, is what Gal and Jim Stewartson have been saying all along, and others. They're not unique in that regard. But they're my friends, and they're very smart, and they've done a lot of work in this regard. And they described the ongoing insurgency and the plans to take over, and we just watched it happen in real time with disinformation that was not contested, or certainly not contested strongly enough. there was a delay in justice that put our democracy at risk? There was a clinging to white male convention that innately somehow that group seeks to protect each other rather than do the right thing. I mean, I thought Roe is gone was enough of a message to really get people thinking, right? I really did. I really thought that's a red line. I mean, it has to be a red line, right? There's actual women dying and birthing people dying. So that has to be a red line, right? Sarah McBride, so proud. You know, that's the thing. You know, I was thinking about that, GP, when I was coming back from walking the dog. I was thinking about Sarah in particular as being the first transgender woman elected to the U.S. Congress, which is a tremendous victory. Tremendous victory. And I think we will, as we go on today and onward, we're going to have to celebrate all those victories and make sure that those folks have our utmost support and vocal support, because they also are now in the crosshairs of the weaponization of the Justice Department. Oh my God. So we're going to have to really step up to support people that are going to, you know, need the support or will benefit from having vocal support on their behalf. That's really what it comes down to. And that is it. It is also very important to celebrate the victories that are very significant. You know, abortion rights were voted in some cases. I don't know what happened with some of the California measures, but there was an anti-slavery initiative for imprisoned people that eradicated indentured servitude as part of the prison system. So I think that, or forced labor, however, whatever term you want to apply to it. So I'm hoping, God, I hope that passed. Jesus Christ. Fuck. Who knows? So we'll see. But we'll check on those as the day progresses and try and give an update on democracy on the front lines, right? From the state, the local levels where we've had successes. We should talk about those. And we should learn from those too, by the way. We should learn from those in terms of what was the ground game in those cases, if any, right? Like, understand how we succeeded. And, oh my gosh, butterflies. I really do think so. I don't think I want to be shy about the fact that media let us down incredibly. I really do. I'm sorry. I know they can cry foul and go like, well, we did what we had to do, or whatever their excuse is going to be. But the sane washing of Trump and his allies is off the charts banana cuckoo Cocoa Puffs. And I want to blame their corporate overlords, but they're the speaking. They speak online and on air, right? They're the ones who are making these statements. So we can blame the corporate leaders all we want, and we should. But I also hold the journalists accountable for not digging deeper. And the ones that did a great job, we need to lift those folks up too, because they're the ones who are on the front lines and actually putting it on the line. So there's a ton of good folks out there. But at the end of the day, the mass media is woefully broken. And the fact that we back down so cowardly when it came to managing disinformation, or at minimum calling it out, the lack of spine that we've had to confront that and name it and shame it is just shocking to me. It just fucked our democracy. It's like seriously fucked. A republic if you can keep it. I know, you're absolutely right. This will do. Media promoted Trump because the crazy brought the clicks and the eyeballs, and it was simple and easy, and it was cheap because he does it all the time. It was great filler. Do you know how many news stations look for stories? This was like a gift from whatever. But man, at the cost of some humanity, at the cost of Roe being gone, and now forget about it? At the cost of the Department of Education? At the cost of RFK running the FDA and the CDC? With Stephen Miller in some role of power? With Steve Bannon in a role of power? What the fuck have we done? And Elon, I just keep suppressing him. I really do. I keep pushing him back into my psyche and just saying, no, stay there. Stay down there. Elon. Yikes. Teal? Eric Prince? Eric Prince has been talking about privatizing the military and that being a much more effective and efficient way to kill people on his podcast for months. Like out in the open. I could probably pull a clip now and show you Eric Prince saying we should privatize the U.S. military because I can do it with less guys and, illegal ammo. I'm not making that up. That's not hyperbole. That's literally what he said. I know, I don't really hate anyone that I don't know, but they literally have told us what their plans are for the world. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few days when it comes to Ukraine. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Joe's going to do something out of the box. I have to keep looking out the window, watching people go about their day. Yeah, exactly. And, the thing is life does go on, but it becomes harder for our fellow friends and neighbors, if not us. And that's the part that should be untenable. It should be unacceptable that we just put people at greater risk for life and pursuit of their own happiness at minimum. That's pretty sad. Yeah, the oligarchs definitely want it this way. You're absolutely right. Yeah, don't obey in advance. There you go. Thank you, Lee. We really do need to kind of remind ourselves. If they're going to act like they're in a movie, then we should probably act like we're in our own movie when it comes to being the resistance. And take inspiration wherever you can get it.
You keep going. A lot of SEC regulations do specifically require disclosure of things in the past, correct?
Correct.
And they also this doesn't explicitly do that. Keep going, though. Sorry to interrupt.
A lot of regulations require things to be disclosed about the past and the future. Most of them do both. And so I don't think you can draw any inference about what this regulation is intended to do just from that fact. But you can look at the regulatory language, which requires disclosure of factors that make the investment risky. And the fact that there's been a recent misappropriation of 30 million users' private data that is a ticking time bomb that's going to cause $100 billion in damage to the company down the line is a factor that makes investment in the company risky.
Well, that is an argument that seems to me different from the one that I thought was presented by the question. So there can be a situation in which an event has happened in the past.
All right. You're right.
and the company knows that this thing that happened in the past is going to have a continuing effect. There does not have to be a recurrence of a similar event. We're talking about the damage from the past event, which continues to have an effect. That's different from the situation in which something happened in the past. It's a discrete event. It's over. But there's concern that there's a real risk that it's going to happen in the future.
I think that's right.
I thought we took the case to decide the second question, not this first question and that may be the one that fits best with the facts of the case. But I see those two things as quite different.
So what do you do?
Well,
do you just take it as it comes? Is that what the option
item
is?
105 is not limited to requiring disclosures about things.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think you're absolutely right.
You get that from the regulatory language. You get it from the fact that Facebook itself disclosed facts, including the prior occurrence of hacking, and it does so. And with respect to
I don't know. I do have a wait and see. I have a not a wait and see, but kind of a we'll see. Attitude.
A risk factor
somewhat. I keep falling back on
past events that is intended to inform people about factors that make the investment risky, which can incur past events. Who know that the prior versions of the regulation instructed people that gave examples of past events is going to think this is only talking about.
I wonder what Mark Elias is doing this morning.
Two situations. This is what most troubles me about your argument. Although, as I tried to bring out in questioning Mr. Shammingham, I see problems with his as well. Suppose a company, let's go back to the fire example. Suppose a company does an internal, has an inspector come in, the inspector
I just meant
examines the
mindset.
fact
I meant mindset of
wiring
resistance. That's what I was talking about.
Replaced, so it can't be done in less than 6 months, and that there is an X percentage chance that there's going to be a fire.
Although I think Democracy Dino is. Can you restream?
Do they have to disclose?
Yeah, that's what I do.
And they say in answering the 10K, if there is a fire, there may be significant disruption of our operations. Do they have to disclose that internal?
I think that Democracy Dino is going to be busier than
we know that
ever,
there is
though.
an
It seems like
chance that a fire.
I think DOJ is my next.
Possibly yes, but this is
whatever DOJ office is in LA.
Virtual certainty rule. So this is where something is misleading,
I gotta come
not
up with
because it's
something
already
clever
happened
for
in
that.
the past, but because you are not disclosing something that's virtually certain to happen in the future.
Well, it's not virtually certain. There's a certain percentage. Let's say it's a 15% chance.
Well, I think if the statement is understood to imply that there hasn't been a fire in the past,
yeah, I
that's
probably
our case,
can't,
that is our
Oren.
claim here,
I don't think I
and
can
that would be
because
misleading
it's
without regard.
Well,
they'll strike me for copyright
infringement. If there is
infringement.
a fire, there will be a substantial disruption of our operations.
I think if there has
One
been a
battle
fire,
at a time, Oren.
Doesn't say if there has been, if there is a
I understand.
fire.
I understand
Cool.
that. But
All right, we'll
reasonable
figure out a way.
investor,
Maybe we
I
can
think,
show it on
could
Discord.
read that as saying, we wouldn't be talking about fires in hypothetical terms if there had recently been one that calls into question the safety of the entire facility.
If it calls into question the safety of the facility, if the X is high enough, if the probability of it happening is high enough.
Just depends. The channels go.
If there was a fire in the past because of a meteorite.
Just depends.
I mean, that doesn't say anything about the probability. It doesn't increase the infinitesimal probability, infinitesimally low probability of it happening in the future.
I think I agree with it. I think that event would probably be deemed immaterial to investors because it doesn't augur harm to the business going forward.
Well,
that's the opposite of this
I'll
case.
tell you where this is going, and I'll let you
There
go.
you go, Jay Rance. That's a good
Unless
idea.
There's a requirement to say,
yeah, nice. Have a nice smoke. Nice
to quantify in some way the nature of the risk.
I mean, the thing is I certainly believe in
numerical terms or
in us.
descriptive terms,
I
there's
believe
very
in
high
us.
risk, there's a high risk, moderate risk, whatever.
Oh.
Then I don't see the basis.
Thank you
I
so
see
much,
that to be
GP. I'm so glad you
inconsistent with
stopped
the
into
idea
the
that
space
the
last
occurrence of an
night,
event in
this
the
morning.
future, which highlights
Thank
the
you for doing
potential
that.
for
Yeah, baby
the
steps. Be gentle with
materialization of the
ourselves.
risk in the future has
You know,
to
we
be
gotta
disclosed. I don't
we
really
gotta
see a difference
assess.
between those two.
Well,
We
I
gotta
don't think
watch, listen,
that
be still and listen.
A company
No.
is entitled to mislead people about something that occurred in the past.
I'm glad
that
we did
under
that
basic
space last
would be a
night.
material
I am.
event. Just because it has an assessment that it's not going to happen again. It's up to the investors to make that judgment themselves, to value the company based on their own assessment, once they are put on notice that this is actually something that happened in the past.
Thank you.
So is that why you're sticking with that, it has to be a statement that would cause a listener to infer a fact about the past is untrue? I mean, I'm sort of with Justice Alito in trying to understand the probability
Oh,
of
great.
risk
Thanks,
and
Give
whether
Me
a
Coffee.
statement
There you
can
go.
also be misleading if it would
We said
lead
wait,
to
listen,
an
and
inference
well,
that the risk of future harm is zero or very low when the speaker knows it to be much greater than that. Why isn't that another kind of misleadingness that we should be thinking about, or that the SEC was thinking about?
I don't dispute that that is another kind of harm and another way in which a statement could be misleading. I'm simply saying that this case is not about that. Our theory of liability is that this monumentally important event happened in the past, and Facebook misled people into thinking that it hadn't.
Okay.
Yeah, you inspire
thought
me,
when,
GP, to do more TikTok.
Justice Alito put in his two hypotheticals or asked which of these two situations something
I'm going to get the little
happened and it has
dancing dino on
continuing
here,
risk,
too. I just
or
don't know how to
something
download it.
happened, no risk, but it might happen, something like it might happen in the future. This situation presents both, doesn't
I'm
it?
sorry, I may have misunderstood the hypothetical then.
That's what
I
I
do
thought.
I do think the reason it was so devastating that to be misled about this occurrence is both that people were going to be really mad when they found out about it, which is what happened when they did, and that it reveals
happened
other
when-
risks about Facebook's inability to control outside developers' access to third-party or to the private user data. But the ultimate question here, I think, is simply whether there is a categorical rule that these statements are never or always contain that kind of implication. I think everybody agrees that that's not the case. It's always case dependent, and it's always fact specific. And so then I think what's left for the court in this case is to ask, did the Ninth Circuit hold something different? And
Thank you.
are you going to decide the facts of this particular case and whether these particular statements are misleading? I'm happy to talk about why they're not. We haven't focused on that question because we took the court to take the case to decide the general legal question.
Thank you. Justice Thomas?
In this case, as Mr.
Why are you
Shanmugam,
even there?
indicated, is about falsity. So at what point do we analyze that? The event took place in the misuse in 2015?
Yeah.
And and the statement was when?
Statement was in the 2016 annual report.
So do we just look at that period to determine whether or not the statement is false? Because you made a big issue of the materiality part, which is and the harm that later on they find out when there's full disclosure that you got $100 billion loss, 30 million people's data has been disclosed, et cetera. So at what point do we analyze the falsity?
I think at the point that they made the statement. And so we acknowledge that if the event had happened so long ago that it wasn't material, that there would be no liability. But here...
But we're not talking about materiality at this point, right?
I think it would be false if they were to imply. There's an interrelationship between these two. Somebody reading a statement that is intended to put you on notice of risks to the business, what make the investment risky, is not going to read the statement as implying anything about immaterial events, right? And so if the event...
So how do you know in 2016 whether or not it was going to have the downstream, the later effect of $100 billion in market cap drop loss?
So I think two things about that. One is, I do think what actually happened is probative at the least of what was foreseeable at the time. And I think Facebook acknowledged in its warning statements that misuse of this kind could seriously damage the business. And it's only intuitive that it would, because user data is the lifeblood of the company. And if somebody gives away your user data
So is this for Facebook
that you think is
shareholders?
private, people are going to be really
Is this
angry
case
about
on
that,
behalf
as
of
they
them?
were.
I understand all of that, but
Not about the people whose data was breached?
For falsity, none of that comes into play.
Only to the
I'll
extent
find
I
this
think
case
that you
and
would
link
not
it in the
understand a
description.
statement to imply the non-occurrence of an immaterial
Oh,
event.
Grandma of one.
Right. And so once you understand that this is a material event, I
Oh,
agree
I love you.
that how material
Thank
it is
you, Grandma.
doesn't go to falsity. The
And-
question
Love
is,
you,
did this happen or
sweetheart.
not?
Yeah, and finally,
we're gonna make it. I mean,
what
this
role
too
does the fact that
moves
this is at
through.
the motion to
This too moves through.
dismiss,
That's all I'm gonna say.
state
It's not gonna
play
pass.
In our analysis.
So the question
It's not
here,
the
I think,
flu.
is not what's the best reading of these particular statements. It is whether we have plausibly alleged that a reasonable jury can conclude that these statements
Trying to
falsely
give us a
implied
little
that the omitted
normality,
event had not occurred.
as if the SCOTUS
That's
is
the
normal.
question that
Just to
Facebook is
kind
gonna
of
have plenty of
take down
opportunity
the.
later in the case to argue to at summary judgment or
I
to a
don't know.
jury that
That's
these
what I'm
statements,
doing.
what these
I don't know
a
if
reasonable
it's working
person
or not.
understood these statements to make.
Probably not.
To imply. But in Omnicare, this court correctly acknowledged that what statements imply is a question that is principally of fact for the fact finder, and it necessarily makes these kind of cases a little bit messy. It doesn't provide the clarity that some issuers might like.
Justice Alito? Justice Sotomayor? Justice Gorsuch?
I just want to clarify in response to Justice Sotomayor and Justice Alito exactly what you think the question is before us. I thought the question was, in a situation where you disclose the risk of an event occurring in the future that could cause harm, is it false not to disclose that the event, is that statement false because you don't disclose that that same event had happened in the past, even though the harm from that event in the past is over?
That is the question presented on that question, which is very different than what we've been talking about all morning. We agree that the answer is no. If it is not misleading to omit the occurrence of an event that is immaterial because it risks no business harm. And in this case, that is not this case.
Okay. I'll read the transcript on that. Okay. And then the second thing on Justice Thomas's point.
I'm going to have to read on this one.
Getting past the motion, just to put the real world into this for a second, getting past the motion to dismiss is kind of, it's the game, right?
I don't think so. A lot of these cases go to summary judgment. We've collected a number of cases in which
Well, it's a big part of
it is big and it is important.
So it's just, I'm just stating this. It's not just, it can all be resolved at summary judgment. There's a huge issue at stake just getting past the motion to dismiss in a lot of these cases. I think everyone.
No, I acknowledge that, but I think at the end of the day, the question here is whether these statements are capable of implying that an event like this hasn't occurred in the past. And if the answer is they are, then I don't think any amount of policy argument in the world that will justify saying that they aren't. And if this court adopts a categorical rule that's saying statements of this kind are agnostic as a categorical rule about what happened in the past, then I think you are effectively saying that some statements that actually are misleading are not. They're not actionable. And that, we respectfully suggest, is the office of a safe harbor, which Congress authorized the SEC, not the courts, to develop.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Appreciate it.
Justice Barrett? Justice Jackson?
Just to quickly clarify with your response to Justice Kavanaugh. So it's your view that this past event did present a risk of future business harm. Is that right?
That is right.
And so that's why you think their question presented doesn't accurately capture what was going on, because they sort of suggest that it doesn't.
Right. And the only reason that Facebook has ever given why the misappropriation of 30 million users' private data didn't risk business harm, didn't risk people being really mad when it finally came out, is their claim that the public learned the truth in 2015 and didn't care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Barber?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Petitioners ask this court to immunize from fraud liability risk factor statements that misleadingly depict a risk as hypothetical when it has already materialized. That argument is flawed as a matter of law and common sense. Indeed, petitioners now appear to recognize that a risk statement can implicitly misrepresent the past. That is exactly what Facebook's statements did here. There's been some discussion about the question presented and the extent to which it accurately captures what the Court of Appeals held. We agree with respondents that it does not, given the obvious importance of the Cambridge Analytica matter to Facebook's business, which depended so heavily on user data. The Court of Appeals had no occasion to hold that the non-disclosure of an unimportant event renders a risk statement misleading. That's why petitioners have raised the broader argument that a risk statement categorically implies nothing about the past. This court rejected a very similar argument in the Omnicare case, and it should take the same course here. I welcome the court's questions.
Mr. Shanmugam said that you have the burden of, or should have the burden of, saying exactly what else they should have said. to meet the requirements of 105 and 10B?
I don't think that's respondents' burden, but I do think that respondents gave a good answer to that question, which is Facebook should have said at least that they had experienced a significant episode of misappropriation of user data. That would have avoided the misleading impression left by the statements that they did make here.
Was it considered significant in 2016 when they filed the statement, the 105 statement?
Yes, I think it certainly was considered significant based on the actions that Facebook took, emailing Cambridge Analytica quite quickly after determining that its policies had been violated, directing them to delete the data. I think Facebook was, at least on the allegations of this complaint, highly aware of the great risk to its business that was posed by this episode.
Do you agree with Mr. Russell that a probabilistic statement sometimes implies that the event hadn't occurred and sometimes implied that the event had occurred?
I do, and I think to the Chief Justice's question earlier, I agree with respondents that these kinds of matters are not susceptible to bright line rules. That goes for falsity, that goes for materiality, and it would be foreign to the common law of fraud and this court's securities law jurisprudence to impose the kind of bright line, I don't want to call it categorical, but bright line rule that petitioners seem to be advancing. It depends on the particular statement, the particular kind of risk under discussion.
Well, in such a complicated scenario of that sort, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no, it depends on the particular context. That does seem something that it would be nice for something that your client, the Securities and Exchange Commission, might want to exercise its expertise with respect to it. Instead, I think was suggested earlier that this is a good case where we, the court, can provide a lot of guidance on how you should apply these things. Are you concerned about that we may not do as good a job as the SEC?
I think as long as you confine yourself to what respondents have suggested the court hold, which is a statement like this is misleading on this theory only insofar as it implicitly misrepresents that the relevant event has not already occurred, and then the past event that did occur has to be material. If the court so held, I think that would be fine. The SEC could always say more about this, provide more guidance, but that would be true in any kind of case involving a half-truth.
Well, under what circumstances does a statement that is framed like this, if X event occurs, then our business will be hurt? Under what circumstances does a statement that is framed like that imply that the event is not going to happen?
So when the relevant risk is something that any reasonable person would expect to have occurred and would have expected the company to confront in the past, then you wouldn't have that kind of implication?
Well, it isn't a false implication if the risk of the thing happening in the past is more than some quantity. It's more than X. The risk has to be more than X in order for a statement like that to be misleading.
Are you positing that that's what the statement itself says?
I'm positing that the statement says exactly what I said it says.
I'm going to stop this for a second. I'm so sorry. I know we probably can't even keep track of what the hell this is all about. I'm so sorry. It's so disjointed. I'll link it so that you have a chance if you really want to listen to it uninterrupted by my babble. I just had a nice little chat with Bobo on her way out the door to go to work. And, she said to me a lot of things, but one of the things she said was, she wanted you guys to know. She wanted you guys to know she loves you so much. And she was sad last night, but this morning she's mad and refocusing on what she needs to do differently in order to achieve a different outcome, etc. And also that we should protect each other. And that's our role right now, is just to protect each other. And so I thought that was really, really well said. And so, and that's what is she, Jen? I don't know what she is. I'm not sure what she is, what generation she is. She's 28, so whatever generation that is. But as a young woman of childbearing age who is a lesbian, I think she has some on the line that I don't have. And so, if she's going to be determined, then I can't not be determined, which is great. That's always good to have people around you. But yeah, I think that we really, yeah, right, man. We really just kind of have to hold on to what the vision is, like just don't let go of that, because we can't, right? Because if people are actually suffering right now more so than many of us, and people are going to suffer more because of what happened. So it's like it's going to be really incumbent upon us to really look, think one has on the line much of what their child has. Yeah, I mean, there's everyone faces some kind of challenge now, right? Whether it's to your, I don't know, your Social Security, whether it's to your education. But, again, what you said was really good. Yeah, there you go. Ooh, I like that, Carrie. Stop pointing fingers and start linking arms. Boy, I really like that. That hits a good chord inside. That's really cool. I like that. Oh, I want to put the link to the TEDx. I don't think I can play TEDx things either, but what was recommended by Carla about David Engwicht. I'm not sure what his name is. Oopsie. Don't do it, please. But I'll share that link so that you have it. This is the one I could find that was his TEDx Atlantic, so I'm not really sure. I read that as licking and a pictured a bit pile of kitten. What? Stop pointing fingers and start linking arms. You read that as licking and pictured a pile of kittens. A big pile of kittens. Oh, Kamala said it? Oh my goodness. Wow. Is she speaking tonight? Is that what I'm led to believe? Is that what I am led to believe? I believe. Oops. Meh. Okay, that should be the link to the TED Talk that I was able to find. So I'm going to need to be in my feelings. Absolutely. Oh, and here's the thing. Just like any kind of grieving, right? The good old grief matrix or whatever. I don't know. We didn't really pay attention to the grief matrix, but whatever. Part of the whole grieving process, because, I'm grieving for the young women who are dying right now. I really am. I'm grieving for them. That to me is just untenable. Aw, thanks, Butterfly. She's actually sweeter than I am. She's actually a lot sweeter than I am. But you absolutely, there's no right or wrong answer. Oh, Grandma won. She's like her mother. Oh, you're so sweet. And she's far more consistent on her sweetness than I am. But at the same time, oh, what was I saying? Oh, shoot. I just lost it. Oh, my kid. I know my kid's nicer than I am. I don't know how that happened. Maybe that's what it's supposed, maybe that's like that. I don't know. But she's definitely nicer than me. Okay, I can't remember what I was talking about, but it probably wasn't that important. Feelings. Maggots in there. Feelings. I guess we're in our feelings now. Oh, feelings. Oh, that's the thing. Yes, thank you. I think that, this is part of that where regardless of where you are in that, what you're feeling is completely authentic to you. Period. Full stop. There's nothing wrong with any type of emotion that you're going to go through as part of this whole process when a lot of us have put a lot of emphasis and attention on this entire like insurgency network. You know, it's hard, right? Because you kind of, all of us to varying degrees, immerse ourselves in this part of the pool, right? We go to this deeper end of the pool. So we're a little more immersed in it than, you know, a lot of other people, just for many good reasons. But I think that, you know, it still is good to take a step back, but then also through the lens of the information that we have about what they've discussed and what they've planned and what to look for and signs and things like that is good information to build up your kind of media literacy around this, around what we can look towards or look for and what the warning signs might be and all that kind of stuff. You know, kind of like Ivan Raiklan saying, hey, Jamie Raskin, I'm coming for you, which is, I think, what he said on Twitter this morning. Let me see if I can remember what I said to the younger queer woman about the environment for the LGBTQ community. Kamala Harris expected to speak at 4 p.m., so that would be 1 p.m., Neil? My time is at 4 p.m. Eastern? I would imagine it is. That would make sense. So I'll come back for that. Yeah, I'll definitely come back for that. I think that would be a good idea. Okay, sweet. Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't seen this much anti-LGBTQ rhetoric since the AIDS crisis, and we did a lot of shouting back then. There will be shouty women and LGBTQ people and people who are not white, and that's okay. Actually, yes. Yes, and you know, and I think of this in regards to I am disappointed again in white women again. And I want to kind of understand. I really want this. I guess I don't want to understand, but I am so moved by the lack of access to health care that women and birthing people are experiencing right now, just with the restrictions that removing Roe from the federal law of the land did, right? I'm already struggling with how many stories of loss we're hearing about because of, you know, draconian or whatever, however you want to call them, vigilante misogynistic laws have been put in place. I can't believe 20 million more. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where these people came from, but, you know, I mean, also, I think we learned a lot about our country. And one of the things that the silly people on TV last night were talking about was, you know, certain measures in certain states were passed, like the abortion measures and other things like that. Missouri, for example, I believe passed an abortion protection measure. But far more things, I don't know. I'm very disturbed. You know, one of the things I was just talking to Bobo about, because she was letting me know about the state measures here in California. And I believe, I want to look this up to make sure I don't misquote anything, but she said that the anti-slavery measure lost. The rise of the minimum wage lost. Increasing penalties, prison time for thefts under $950 passed. This is my home state. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't think that there was actually no formal opposition to the anti-slavery measure. There was no opposition to the anti-slavery measure. And it failed. I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. We have a greed problem in this country. That's what we have. We have a Russia problem, sure. We also have a greed problem and a bigotry problem that for some reason we're not willing to really acknowledge. And I mean, I think I know how we fix it, but I don't think it fixes right away. And of course, I don't think it fixes it. But I think if you don't increase media literacy and whole child education, starting with preschool, you are doomed to failure. One thing we Republicans and Democrats have in common, let's smoke a nice fat joint. Yes, that too, but we can't, we have work to do because people are depending on people to help out. And so, this isn't a joke. This isn't a sporting contest. There are real losers in this. There are real losers. And the winners that you just voted for are billionaires. So you voted to make the billionaires less responsible for doing their part. And you put them in charge of everything that democracy had helped give us, like public education. And you just shit on it. Ooh, exercise is a good idea. So, this wasn't a this wasn't a sports ball contest. There's people's lives on the line. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or anything. I'm just going based on what's happening right now in the data. I'm just looking at the data. So, c'est la vie. La vie. No. Old joke. I think I'm going to stop for now. Let's take a break from all of this. There is a problem. There is a problem in this country. And we will, yet again, stand up, make sure, and hopefully make sure each other are okay. And, I voted for everybody's rights. I don't know why people don't do that. I don't understand that. I don't vote for a person. I don't vote for a party. I vote for the people who have actually demonstrated to me that they do things and are able to accomplish things even against all odds, of a Congress that doesn't support them or whatever. That they've accomplished things that actually made people's lives better. There are seniors who are alive today because they now have consistent access to their insulin. As someone who can't afford her drugs, I'm going to tell you right now, there are so many people going without the drugs that they need that there's no pack your bags. Soros doesn't give a shit about any of this, by the way. I don't know why you guys think that he's such a boogeyman. He runs a foundation, okay? If you have a problem with what the foundation does, you should probably submit it to the IRS. There's a form on the IRS website to complain about a nonprofit. Have at it. My God. Spend your time doing something other than tugging on your dick. Kamala Harris said rights are not cake. More rights for others doesn't take anything from anyone else. That's so true. Anyway. Actually, and I don't think Soros Alex Soros lives here, but George doesn't. George lives over in London or something like that. I don't know. But I think Alex has a home in New York, but I don't think he actually lives there full time either, probably. I mean, I would imagine he spends a lot of time in Europe. So I don't know. The guys who run foundations are not really, those foundations are not really the problem. I know you like to think they are because you're anti-Semitic. So there's that. You're a bigot, but other than that, in a civilized country. Yeah. This is America. There you go. Long may she wave. Or not, as the case may be. All right, I'm going to come back for Kamala's speech in the afternoon. I'll throw up a reminder. So please come back for that, and let's spend a little more time together. And, you know, we'll take this one segment at a time. Put one foot in front of the other. All right? We're going to be all right. I mean, we have to. We don't have any choice. There is no choice. We are the ones who came to save us. Yeah. Take care, everyone. I really appreciate you spending time with me this morning, and I really wish you all the peace that you can muster right now. Max is wearing a different shirt, Butter. Yes, Thistle is Max is here with us. Oh, thank you, Oren. Thank you, Grandma of One. It's really nice to be surrounded by nice people. Absolutely. So yeah, we're gonna get through this. You're right, Neil. That's right. That's right. They say it on 5/8. Good old Greg and LB. We certainly have some smart people on our side, don't we? Each other, first of all. Oh, we're a great crew. We're all a great crew. Yeah. So anyway, thanks again. Hang in there. Don't watch any more news for a minute, okay? Maybe turn Twitter off. I don't know. And you know, hit me up around the 4:00 hour on the East Coast, and we'll do this again. All right? Okay. I love you guys. You make everything better. You make losing elections to demagogues even better. So thank you. Yes, redo the garden. Fuck yeah. I'm going to get some fresh air too myself. That's a great idea. All right. All right, my loves.